Resign or date me, Meredith Blackwell muttered under her breath, staring at the sleek glass doors of Hartwell and Associates consulting firm in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. The morning sun reflected off the building's pristine facade, much like how she'd always viewed her perfectly ordered life, polished, untouchable, and exactly as it should be. At 28, Meredith embodied everything her old money Charleston family expected. Stanford MBA, designer heels clicking confidently across marble lobbies, and a trust fund that cushioned every decision she'd ever made. Her blonde hair was always perfectly straightened, her Hermes bag never out of place, and her opinions about merit-based success never questioned by anyone in her circle. "Morning, Meredith," called Jessica Richardson, her closest friend since prep school, stepping out of her white Tesla. "Ready for another day of showing these people how real business gets done?" Meredith laughed, the sound carrying that particular confidence that comes from never having to worry about rent. "Always. Though I heard they hired some new diversity consultant. Probably another one of those affirmative action appointments trying to tell us about systemic barriers." She made air quotes, rolling her blue eyes. As if working hard isn't enough anymore. The elevator ride to the 15th floor was filled, with Jessica's chatter about her weekend in the Hamptons, but Meredith's mind wandered to the promotion she was expecting. Senior Vice President of Strategic Development. It was practically guaranteed. Her father's connections, her Ivy League credentials, and her track record of landing high-profile clients made her the obvious choice. I mean, everyone knows quotas are ruining corporate America, Jessica continued, checking her reflection in the elevator's polished walls. "My dad says companies are so scared of lawsuits, they'll hire anyone these days, regardless of qualifications." Meredith nodded absently, adjusting her pearl necklace, a graduation gift from her grandmother, passed down through 3 generations of Blackwell women who'd never questioned their place at society's pinnacle. The elevator dinged at their floor, and they stepped into the familiar world of glass offices and muted conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes. The morning proceeded exactly as Meredith expected. She reviewed client proposals in her corner office, its windows overlooking Charlotte's financial district, where construction cranes reached toward the sky like monuments to progress she'd never had to struggle for. Her assistant, Jennifer Walsh, brought her usual oat milk latte and reminded her about the afternoon's budget meeting. "Oh, and Meredith," Jennifer added, her voice carrying a note of curiosity, "there's buzz about the new consulting director. Apparently, he's implementing some kind of equity audit for all departments." Meredith's jaw tightened slightly. "Equity audit? What's that supposed to mean?" "Not sure, but Patricia from HR mentioned reviewing hiring practices and promotion criteria. Some people seem nervous." After Jennifer left, Meredith stared out her window at the busy street below. She watched well-dressed professionals hurrying between buildings, most looking exactly like her, polished, purposeful, and privileged. A few blocks away, she could see a different Charlotte. Older buildings, different rhythms, people who probably rode the bus instead of driving BMWs. But that world had never touched hers, existing only as background scenery to her important life. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Darling, don't forget dinner Sunday. The Hamiltons are joining. Their son Marcus just made partner at his law firm. Such a bright young man from a good family." Meredith smiled, typing back quickly before diving into her client reports. Her world made sense. Merit rewarded effort. Success followed preparation, and good people naturally rose to positions of influence. The idea that someone might suggest this system needed auditing felt like a personal attack on everything she'd worked for, everything her family represented. As lunch approached, she gathered her materials for the afternoon meeting, confident that whatever changes this new consultant proposed wouldn't affect someone with her qualifications and connections. After all, real talent always prevailed. "Hello, the Shade of Love family. So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment, and it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world, so don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. Meredith's childhood home in Charleston's historic district stood like a testament to generations of Blackwell success. Sunday dinner with her parents was a weekly ritual where traditional values were served alongside her mother's famous shrimp and grits. The dining room walls displayed portraits of ancestors who'd built their fortune through hard work and intelligent investments. As her father always said, "So tell me about this new position," Robert Blackwell asked, cutting his prime rib with surgical precision. "Your mother mentioned some changes at the firm." Meredith set down her wine glass, choosing her words carefully. "They've brought in some consultant to review our practices. Something about diversity and inclusion." She couldn't hide the slight disdain in her voice. Her mother, Caroline, shook her perfectly coiffed head. "Oh, darling, that's unfortunate. Your father and I have always believed that merit should be the only consideration. When people start making exceptions or lowering standards—" "Exactly," Robert interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been questioned. "I built my practice by hiring the best candidates, period. Colorblind as it should be. These new policies just create resentment and undermine truly qualified people like yourself." Meredith felt validation wash over her like warm honey. This was exactly why she cherished these family gatherings. They reminded her that her perspectives weren't cruel or outdated, but principled and fair. Her parents had raised her to believe that America was fundamentally a meritocracy, where hard work and talent naturally led to success. "I mean, look at you," Caroline continued, reaching across the polished mahogany table to pat her daughter's hand. "Stanford education, excellent references, proven results. If someone can't see that, it's their loss, not yours." After dinner, Meredith sat in her childhood bedroom, now converted into an elegant guest space, but still containing photos from her debutante ball, sorority formals, and study abroad in France. Every image showed her surrounded by people who looked exactly like her, blonde, privileged, smiling with the confidence that comes from never having doors closed in your face. She picked up her high school yearbook, flipping through pages of classmates who'd gone on to prestigious universities and family businesses. The few students of color seemed to fade into the background, and Meredith realized she'd never really thought about where they'd ended up or what challenges they might have faced that never touched her world. But then she shook her head, closing the yearbook firmly. This kind of thinking was exactly the problem, always looking for excuses and special circumstances instead of focusing on individual achievement. Her success wasn't handed to her. She'd earned every grade, every internship, every promotion through dedication and intelligence. Her phone buzzed with messages from Jessica and their college friends, discussing their upcoming girls' trip to Napa Valley. The conversation flowed easily between wine tastings and spa reservations, the casual way they discussed spending thousands on a weekend reflecting a reality they'd never questioned. "Can't wait to get away from all this corporate drama," Jessica had texted. "Sometimes I think these diversity initiatives are just ways for unqualified people to avoid taking responsibility for their own limitations." Meredith typed back agreement, feeling the comfortable certainty of shared beliefs. Tomorrow she'd return to work with renewed confidence in her worldview, ready to weather whatever changes this consultant proposed. Her family's wisdom, her personal achievements, and her circle's support all confirmed what she'd always known, that success was simply a matter of effort and ability, and anyone suggesting otherwise was probably making excuses for their own shortcomings. Monday morning brought the quarterly client presentation at Charlotte's upscale Founders Club, where Meredith felt most at home among the crystal chandeliers and oil portraits of distinguished white gentlemen who'd built the city's business foundation. She'd chosen her navy Armani suit carefully, knowing it projected exactly the right combination of authority and femininity. "Excellent work on the Morrison account," praised Vernon Hartwell III, the firm's managing partner, as Meredith concluded her presentation to potential clients. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking that sets us apart from our competitors." Meredith smiled graciously, accepting congratulations from the room full of executives who looked remarkably similar to her father, successful, confident white men who valued tradition and results. She noticed how naturally the conversation flowed when everyone shared the same background, the same assumptions about how business should be conducted. During the networking break, she found herself in conversation with Charles Morrison, CEO of a major development company. "You know, Meredith, it's refreshing to work with someone who understands that business is about results, not politics," he said, sipping his bourbon. "Too many firms are getting distracted by all this social justice nonsense instead of focusing on what actually drives success." "I couldn't agree more," Meredith replied smoothly. "At the end of the day, clients want competence and results. Everything else is just window dressing." She excused herself to use the restroom and found herself walking past the club's service entrance where she glimpsed several black employees taking a smoke break. Their uniforms marked them clearly as the help, and Meredith felt that familiar, unconscious comfort knowing everyone was in their proper place. She didn't think of it as superiority, just natural order, the way things worked when people applied themselves appropriately. Back in the main dining room, conversation had turned to the city's recent affordable housing initiatives. "Complete waste of taxpayer money," declared another executive. "If people want better housing, they should work harder and earn it like the rest of us did." Meredith nodded along, though something nagged at her. A memory of driving past those neighborhoods, seeing children playing in streets that looked nothing like her tree-lined childhood block. But she pushed the thought away. These men had built successful companies. Surely they understood economic realities better than bleeding heart politicians. As the event concluded, she overheard two club members discussing the new consultant at her firm. "Marcus Williams, isn't it? Used to work for some nonprofit before moving into corporate consulting. Probably one of those social warrior types trying to fix problems that don't exist." The name caught Meredith's attention, Marcus Williams. So that was the consultant everyone was talking about. She imagined another well-meaning but misguided professional who'd been handed opportunities through quotas rather than qualifications, now trying to impose guilty white liberal policies on functioning businesses. Walking to her car, Meredith felt satisfied with the day's success. The client meeting had gone perfectly, reinforcing her belief that excellence spoke for itself. Tomorrow's budget meeting might bring uncomfortable discussions about diversity initiatives, but she was confident that reason and results would ultimately prevail over political correctness. Her BMW started smoothly, climate control automatically adjusting to her preferred temperature. As she drove through Charlotte's financial district toward her Dilworth apartment, she passed bus stops where people waited in the heat, office buildings where custodial staff emptied trash bins, and construction sites where workers in hard hats labored under the blazing Carolina sun. But Meredith's mind was already on tomorrow's challenges, secure in the knowledge that her world operated on principles of fairness and merit that had served her family well for generations. Tuesday's budget meeting was held in the firm's largest conference room, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Charlotte's skyline. Meredith arrived early, claiming her usual seat near Vernon Hartwell and arranging her leather portfolio with practiced precision. She'd prepared extensively, certain her expertise would shine during discussions about departmental efficiency and resource allocation. The door opened as other department heads filed in, but Meredith looked up from her notes to see someone unexpected. A tall black man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit entered, carrying a simple leather briefcase and exuding quiet confidence. His presence seemed to shift the room's energy immediately. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Marcus Williams, our new Director of Organizational Development," Vernon announced. "Marcus comes to us from the Turner Foundation, where he led transformational change initiatives for Fortune 500 companies." Meredith felt her assumptions stumble. This wasn't the social justice warrior she'd imagined. Marcus moved with the same professional authority as the executives she respected, his handshake firm when Vernon introduced them, his voice carrying Southern warmth without diminishing. His obvious intelligence. "Ms. Blackwell, excellent work on the Morrison presentation yesterday," Marcus said, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. though I'm curious about the demographic analysis. Your client base seems remarkably homogeneous. The observation hit like ice water. Meredith's smile tightened. We focus on results, Mr. Williams. Our clients choose us based on competence, not demographics. Of course, Marcus replied smoothly, settling into his chair. I'm just interested in exploring whether we might be missing opportunities in underserved markets. Sometimes the most profitable growth comes from expanding our perspective. As the meeting progressed, Marcus presented his preliminary findings with devastating precision. Charts showed the firm's hiring patterns, promotion rates by demographic, and client acquisition strategies. Each slide revealed patterns Meredith had never noticed, or perhaps had chosen not to see. Our analysis indicates significant gaps in market penetration, Marcus explained, his voice professional but unwavering. Minority-owned businesses represent a $1.4 trillion market segment we're essentially ignoring. That's not social justice, that's leaving money on the table. Meredith felt her carefully constructed worldview beginning to crack. She'd expected emotional appeals about fairness, but Marcus was speaking her language: profit, efficiency, competitive advantage. Worse, his data was irrefutable, his presentation flawless, his business acumen obvious. But surely, she interjected, her voice sounding sharper than intended, we should focus on the most qualified candidates and clients, regardless of demographics. Isn't that what true equality means? Marcus turned toward her, and for a moment, she saw something flash across his features. Not anger, but something deeper, more complex. That's an interesting perspective, Ms. Blackwell. Tell me, how do you define qualified? Because our data suggests we might be using criteria that accidentally exclude exceptional talent. The word accidentally hung in the air like a challenge. Meredith felt heat rising in her cheeks, defensive thoughts racing through her mind. She wanted to argue, to defend the system that had rewarded her hard work and preparation, but something in Marcus's steady gaze made her pause. Vernon cleared his throat. Well, these are certainly thought-provoking insights, Marcus. Why don't we schedule individual department reviews to discuss implementation strategies? As the meeting concluded, Meredith gathered her materials with less confidence than usual. Marcus's presentation had been undeniably professional, his credentials impressive, his arguments logical rather than emotional. She'd prepared to dismiss him based on assumptions that were now crumbling. Walking to her office, she caught herself replaying his questions. How did she define qualified? What criteria was she using? For the first time in her professional life, Meredith wondered if her certainty might be built on foundations less solid than she'd believed. The rest of Tuesday passed in an uncomfortable haze. Meredith found herself distracted during client calls, Marcus's questions echoing in her mind like persistent background music she couldn't silence. That evening, she sat in her pristine Dilworth apartment, its exposed brick walls and modern fixtures reflecting the gentrification that had transformed the formerly working-class neighborhood into trendy professional housing. She poured herself a glass of wine and opened her laptop, intending to review quarterly reports. Instead, she found herself Googling Marcus Williams. His LinkedIn profile was impressive. Harvard undergraduate, Wharton MBA, 5 years at McKinsey before transitioning to nonprofit leadership, then back to corporate consulting. This wasn't someone who'd been handed opportunities. His credentials rivaled her own. Her phone rang, interrupting her research. "Mer, you sound weird." Jessica's voice carried concern and curiosity. "How did the meeting go with that consultant?" "It was fine," Meredith replied, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "Actually, he was more professional than I expected." "Don't tell me you're buying into his agenda," Jessica laughed. "Remember what happened at Davidson and Associates? They hired some diversity consultant, and within 6 months, half their best people were passed over for promotions. It's all about optics now, not actual qualifications." After hanging up, Meredith walked to her bedroom window, gazing down at the street below. A black family was unloading groceries from an older sedan, the children helping carry bags into a modest duplex that hadn't yet been renovated into luxury condos. She watched the father lift his youngest daughter onto his shoulders, both of them laughing, and felt something shift uncomfortably in her chest. For the first time, she wondered about their stories. What did the father do for work? Had he gone to college? What barriers might he face that never appeared in her path? The questions felt dangerous, threatening the neat categories that had organized her understanding of success and failure. Wednesday morning brought a familiar routine disrupted by unfamiliar thoughts. Her usual confidence felt shaky as she dressed. For work, choosing her clothing with extra care as if armor against uncertainty. The Starbucks line moved slowly, and she found herself actually noticing the barista, a young black woman named Keisha, whose name tag indicated she was saving for nursing school, long hours to pay for classes, Keisha mentioned while preparing Meredith's complex latte order. But nursing's always been my dream. Meredith nodded politely, but the interaction lingered. Here was someone working multiple jobs to achieve goals Meredith had reached without financial stress. The contrast felt uncomfortable, challenging her assumptions about effort and opportunity. At the office, she passed Marcus in the hallway, and their brief exchange was cordial but charged with unspoken tension. He'd mentioned scheduling individual department reviews, and Meredith knew her turn was coming. The prospect filled her with anxiety she couldn't quite name. Not fear of professional criticism, but something deeper, more personal. That afternoon, she had lunch with her mentor, Catherine Sterling, a senior partner who'd guided Meredith's career since her first day. Over salads at their usual upscale spot, Catherine expressed similar concerns about the firm's new direction. Change for change's sake rarely improves anything, Catherine said, her silver hair perfectly styled, her Chanel suit impeccable. We've built our reputation on excellence and tradition. Now suddenly we're supposed to question everything that's made us successful? But even Catherine's reassurance felt less solid than usual. Meredith found herself remembering Marcus's presentation, his calm professionalism, the way he'd made business arguments rather than emotional appeals. She'd expected to dismiss him easily, but his competence made her defenses feel suddenly inadequate. Walking back to the office, she passed a construction site where workers were installing a sign for affordable family housing, a community partnership. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her own building had displaced similar families just 2 years earlier, transforming their neighborhood into spaces they could no longer afford. Hello, the shade of love family? So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment. And it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world. So don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. Thursday afternoon, Meredith's carefully ordered world encountered an unexpected disruption. Leaving a client meeting downtown, she decided to grab coffee from a local shop instead of her usual corporate chain. The small cafe was crowded, filled with an eclectic mix of students, artists, and professionals who didn't quite fit the financial district's polished aesthetic. Standing in line, she noticed familiar broad shoulders and recognized Marcus Williams ahead of her, engaged in animated conversation with an elderly black woman whose walker was decorated with colorful ribbons. Meredith moved closer, curiosity overriding her usual social boundaries. Now, Mrs. Patterson, Marcus was saying gently, don't worry about the insurance paperwork. I've got a friend at Legal Aid who specializes in healthcare appeals. She'll get this sorted out for you. Baby, you've already done too much, the woman replied, her voice trembling with gratitude. Paying for my grandson's books, helping with the apartment deposit when we got evicted. Mrs. Patterson taught my little sister to read when the schools failed her, Marcus interrupted softly. She used to give us snacks when we had nowhere to go after school. This isn't charity. It's family taking care of family. Meredith watched, transfixed, as Marcus pulled out his personal checkbook and wrote something, handing it to Mrs. Patterson despite her protests. The gesture was private, unperformed, done with such natural grace that it clearly wasn't unusual behavior for him. When Mrs. Patterson left, Marcus turned and noticed Meredith. For a moment, both seemed surprised by the encounter outside there. Professional context. Small world, he said, his smile genuine but guarded. Good coffee here. They actually pay their employees a living wage. I was just exploring the neighborhood, Meredith replied, feeling oddly caught off balance. That was very kind what you did for that lady. Marcus's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Patterson helped raise half the kids in my old neighborhood. She never had much, but she always shared what she had. Now that I can, it's my turn. They ordered coffee and, almost without planning, ended up sitting at a small table near the window. The conversation started professionally. Marcus asking about her work, Meredith describing client strategies, but gradually became more personal. I grew up about 10 minutes from here, Marcus said, gesturing toward the east side of the city. Very different Charlotte than what most people in our building experience. But Mrs. Patterson and people like her taught me that circumstances don't determine character. Choices do. Meredith found herself studying his face as he spoke, noting the way his eyes reflected both warmth and something harder, more complex. This wasn't the angry activist she'd expected, nor the quota-filling token her social circle had assumed. Marcus possessed a quiet strength that seemed earned rather than inherited. Your presentation yesterday? She began hesitantly. The data about market gaps. Where did you develop that analysis? Years of watching talented people get overlooked, he replied simply. Not because they weren't qualified, but because they didn't fit certain expectations about what qualifications look like. I learned that expanding definitions of merit often reveals hidden assets. A young black woman approached their table, her face lighting up when she saw Marcus. Professor Williams, I didn't know you came here. I just wanted to thank you again for the recommendation letter. I got into the graduate program. Marcus stood to embrace her warmly. Tamara, that's fantastic. Your research proposal was brilliant. They'd have been crazy not to accept you. He tutored me through statistics when I was struggling, Tamara explained to Meredith. Never charged. Me anything, just said education should lift everyone up. After Tamara left, Meredith sat quietly, processing what she'd witnessed. Marcus wasn't just professionally competent. He was actively invested in others' success in ways that cost him time and resources. The comfortable categories she'd used to understand people like him were proving inadequate. I should get back to the office, she said finally, though she wasn't entirely sure why she was ending the conversation. Of course, Marcus replied, standing as well. Maybe we can continue discussing market expansion strategies sometime. I think you might be surprised by what's possible when we widen our definition of opportunity. The weekend brought Meredith's monthly book club meeting at Catherine Sterling's elegant Myers Park home, where Charleston's social elite gathered to discuss literature and life over wine and gourmet appetizers. The conversation inevitably turned to workplace changes, with several women expressing frustration about new corporate policies affecting their companies. It's gotten completely out of hand, declared Patricia Whitman, whose husband owned a major construction firm. They're basically telling us that merit doesn't matter anymore. Everything has to be about race and gender now. Richard's firm just lost a major contract to some minority-owned company that underbid by 30%, added Stephanie Crawford, swirling her wine dramatically. How is that fair competition when they probably got subsidies and special consideration? Meredith listened, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with conversations that had never bothered her before. Something about Marcus's quiet competence, his natural authority, made these complaints sound hollow and defensive rather than principled. Meredith, you've been quiet, Catherine observed. How are things progressing with your consultant situation? It's complicated, Meredith replied carefully. He's not what I expected. Very professional, strong business background. Oh, honey. Patricia laughed condescendingly. They're always polished on the surface. That's how they get hired. But underneath, it's still the same agenda. Redistributing opportunities away from people who've actually earned them. The words stung differently. Now, Meredith found herself thinking about Mrs. Patterson, about Tamara's gratitude, about Marcus writing personal checks to help people who'd helped him. None of that fit the selfish narrative her friends were constructing. Sunday dinner with her. Parents felt equally strained. Her father was particularly animated about recent political developments, his voice carrying the certainty that had always comforted Meredith, but now seemed brittle. "The problem with these diversity consultants," Robert declared, cutting into his stake with unnecessary force, "is they assume inequality proves discrimination. They never consider that different groups might have different values, different priorities, different levels of commitment to success." "Exactly," Caroline agreed. "Look at our family. Your great-grandfather started with nothing and built everything, through discipline and smart decisions. No one handed him anything." Meredith nodded automatically, but privately wondered about the nothing her great-grandfather had started with. She'd heard family stories about his first business loan, obtained through church connections, about land purchased when certain neighborhoods were restricted to white buyers. Had those advantages been invisible because they were so expected? "Darling, you seem distracted," her mother observed. "Is everything all right at work?" "Just thinking about some new perspectives," Meredith replied honestly. "Sometimes it's valuable to question assumptions." Robert's face darkened slightly. "Question assumptions?" "Meredith, our assumptions have created 3 generations of success. Why would you want to undermine that?" The conversation continued around her, but Meredith felt increasingly disconnected from her family's certainty. Their arguments weren't wrong exactly, but they felt incomplete, missing something important she couldn't yet name. That night, alone in her apartment, she stood on her balcony overlooking the city lights. Charlotte sprawled before her, gleaming towers downtown, suburban neighborhoods spreading toward the horizon, and somewhere in the darkness, communities she'd never really seen despite living here for 3 years. Marcus's words echoed in her memory. Expanding definitions of merit often reveals hidden assets. She'd always believed merit was objective, measurable, fair. But what if the measurements themselves were skewed? What if the playing field wasn't as level as she'd assumed? The questions felt dangerous, threatening foundations she'd never thought to examine. But they also felt necessary, growing stronger despite her social circle's disapproval and her family's disappointment. The following Monday, Meredith received an email requesting her individual department review with Marcus. Her stomach tightened with nervousness she couldn't entirely explain. Part professional anxiety, part personal curiosity about this man who was challenging everything she thought she knew about success and fairness. The meeting was scheduled for late afternoon in a small conference room away from the main executive offices. When Meredith arrived, Marcus was already there, reviewing documents with the same focused intensity she brought to her own work. "Thank you for making time," he began formally, then his expression softened slightly. "Though I hope we can speak honestly today. Sometimes the most productive conversations happen when we drop the corporate diplomacy." Meredith sat across from him, her professional mask intact but feeling less secure than usual. "Of course, though I should mention that I believe our current systems work well for people who apply themselves appropriately." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss. Help me understand what applying themselves appropriately means to you." The question caught her off guard with its directness. She'd expected policy discussions, not personal philosophy. "Well, education, networking, professional development, working hard, making smart choices, taking responsibility for outcomes. All important," Marcus agreed. "I'm curious, though, when you made smart choices, what options were available to you?" Meredith felt a flicker of defensiveness. "I worked for my success. Good grades, prestigious university, competitive internships." "Absolutely," Marcus interrupted gently. "I'm not questioning your effort. I'm asking about access. When you needed stellar SAT prep, what happened?" "My parents hired the best tutors," she replied automatically, then stopped. The implication hung between them. "And when you needed internships, how did you find them?" "Family connections, alumni networks." Her voice trailed off as understanding dawned. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice remaining kind but persistent. "When you made mistakes or faced setbacks, what safety nets existed?" Meredith stared at him, her mind racing through memories she'd never examined this way. The unpaid internships she could afford because her parents covered rent. The prestigious Opportunities that came through her father's golf partners. The risks she could take knowing her trust fund would catch her if she fell. "I still worked hard," she said quietly, but the words felt hollow now. "Of course you did," Marcus replied. "Hard work matters tremendously." But Meredith, he used her first name for the first time, and something in his tone made her look directly at him. What if someone worked twice as hard but started with half the access? Would you call them less qualified if they achieved slightly less? The question hit like a physical blow. Meredith felt tears threatening, though she couldn't understand why. "I never thought, I assumed." "You assumed the system was fair because it treated you fairly," Marcus said gently. "That's natural. Most people believe their experience is universal. But what if your experience was the exception, not the rule?" She thought about Mrs. Patterson, about Tamara struggling with statistics, about the construction workers she passed daily without really seeing. "How do you know all this? About fair systems and unfair advantages?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Because I've lived on both sides, Meredith. I grew up in public housing, raised by a grandmother who cleaned houses for families like yours. But I was also lucky enough to get a scholarship that opened doors I'd never imagined existed." "What was that like?" she asked, surprising herself with the question's sincerity. "Lonely," he admitted, "always wondering if I belonged, if my success was real or just diversity theater, always having to be twice as good to prove I deserved to be there, but also educational, seeing how different the world looks depending on where you're standing." Meredith felt something cracking inside her chest, a wall she hadn't known existed beginning to crumble. For the first time in her life, she was seeing her privilege not as earned rewards, but as unexamined advantages. "What do I do with this information?" she whispered. Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. "Whatever feels right to you." But Meredith, recognizing advantages isn't about guilt. It's about opportunity. Opportunity to use your position to create more fairness, not less. The revelation came at Friday's partners' meeting when Vernon announced the promotion decisions. Meredith sat in the familiar conference room, surrounded by faces she'd known for years, expecting to hear her name called for senior vice president. Instead, Vernon cleared his throat and delivered news that shattered her assumptions about merit and fairness. "The senior VP position will go to Jonathan Whitmore," Vernon announced. "His family's connections to our biggest clients make him the obvious choice for this role." Meredith felt the words hit like ice water. Jonathan Whitmore. Mediocre performance. Average credentials. But his father was CEO of their largest client. Everything she'd believed about merit-based promotion crumbled. In that single moment, the system she'd defended so passionately had just revealed itself as exactly what Marcus had suggested. A network of privilege disguised as objective evaluation. After the meeting, she walked numbly to her office, her mind reeling. She'd worked harder, performed better, brought in more revenue than Jonathan by every measurable standard. But his connections trumped her competence, exposing the lie she'd been living her entire career. Her phone buzzed with concerned messages from Jessica and other friends, word of the promotion decision spreading quickly through their network. But their sympathy felt empty now. Their suggestions to keep working hard and wait for the next opportunity rang hollow when she finally understood how the game was actually played. That evening, she found herself driving through neighborhoods she'd never visited, past the public housing complex where Marcus had grown up. The buildings were clean but worn, children playing basketball on cracked courts while their parents watched from small porches and balconies. She parked and walked through a nearby community center, reading flyers for GED programs, job training, and after-school tutoring. A young black teenager was helping elderly residents register for voter information, his patience and kindness obvious as he explained forms to people who struggled with reading. This was the community Marcus had emerged from, and suddenly Meredith understood the depth of his journey in ways that humbled her completely. Her phone rang, Marcus's name on the screen. She answered without thinking. "Meredith, I heard about the promotion decision." "I'm sorry." "Are you?" she asked, her voice sharper than intended. Isn't this exactly what you were talking about? The system revealing its true priorities? Actually, yes, he replied honestly. But I'm still sorry it happened to you. Being passed over for connections rather than competence hurts, regardless of background. His empathy undid her completely. Here was someone she'd initially dismissed offering comfort when her own world had abandoned her. I think I'm finally understanding what you meant about the system, she whispered. I just never thought it would affect me. Privilege is invisible until it's absent, Marcus said gently. The question now is what you want to do with this new understanding. Sitting in her car outside the community center, watching children whose futures would be shaped by barriers she'd never faced, Meredith felt something fundamental shift inside her. The anger wasn't just about her lost promotion. It was about the years she'd spent defending a system that had never been as fair as she'd believed. Saturday morning found Meredith in an unexpected place, volunteering at the East Side Community Center where Marcus had mentioned growing up. She'd called him Friday night, her voice shaky with newfound determination, asking how she could help rather than complain about unfairness. You don't have to prove anything, Marcus had said when she explained her desire to volunteer. But if you're serious, Mrs. Johnson runs tutoring programs for kids whose schools don't have resources for individual attention. Now Meredith sat across from 8-year-old Destiny Williams, helping with third-grade math while the child's mother, Sandra, worked her second job as a weekend house cleaner. Destiny was bright, curious, asking questions that revealed intelligence constrained only by limited educational resources. Miss Meredith, why do some schools have computers and some don't? Destiny asked, her dark eyes serious and thoughtful. The question pierced through Meredith's remaining defenses. How could she explain that funding formulas tied to property values created educational apartheid? That children like Destiny started kindergarten already behind peers whose parents could afford preschool, tutoring, and enrichment activities? That's a really good question, sweetheart, Meredith replied honestly. It's not fair, and people are working to change it. Marcus appeared beside their table, having spent the morning helping high schoolers with college application essays. How's our new volunteer doing? He asked Destiny. She's really good at explaining fractions, Destiny beamed. And she doesn't talk to me like I'm stupid. Meredith felt her heart squeeze. How many people had talked to this brilliant child like she was stupid? How many opportunities would Destiny miss not because of lack of ability, but because of lack of access to resources Meredith had taken for granted? During lunch break, Marcus walked Meredith through the neighborhood, pointing out closed schools, limited public transportation, and food deserts where fresh groceries required car trips most families couldn't afford. Each block revealed systemic barriers she'd never considered. I used to think people just needed to work harder, she admitted, watching teenagers help elderly neighbors with grocery bags. I never realized how much energy people spend just navigating obstacles I never faced. It's not about guilt, Marcus replied. It's about awareness. You didn't create these systems, but now that you see them, you get to choose what role you want to play. That afternoon, Meredith helped Sandra Williams organize tax documents for earned income credit applications. Sandra worked 3 jobs, cleaning houses, weekend retail, and evening childcare, but still struggled to afford rent in their modest apartment. Destiny's so smart, Sandra said proudly, organizing receipts with careful precision. Teachers say she could be anything she wants. I just want to make sure she gets chances I never had. What chances did you miss? Meredith asked gently. Sandra smiled sadly. Wanted to be a nurse, like my mama, but when she got sick, I had to choose between college and taking care of family. No choice, really. Family comes first. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd had help, if there'd been programs. Driving home that evening, Meredith felt transformed by the day's experiences. She'd touched a reality that existed parallel to her privileged world, seen. Intelligence and determination constrained by circumstances rather than character. The children she'd tutored were as bright as her prep school classmates, their parents as loving and ambitious as her own, but their paths to success were blocked by barriers her world had never acknowledged. She called Marcus that night, her voice thick with emotion. I want to do something, not just volunteer on weekends, but really change things. How do I use my position to make a difference? Start tomorrow, he replied simply. Use your voice, your access, your platform. The same privileges that open doors for you can open doors for others, if you're brave enough to use them that way. Hello, the Shade of Love family. So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts, yes, every single comment, and it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world, so don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. Monday morning arrived with unusual clarity. Meredith dressed carefully, but differently. Professional attire that projected competence without the subtle status signals she'd relied on before. Today, she would present her own proposal to the partners' meeting, one that would challenge everything her colleagues assumed about business strategy and social responsibility. The conference room filled with familiar faces, but Meredith saw them differently now, not as natural leaders, but as beneficiaries of the same unexamined advantages she'd enjoyed. Vernon called the meeting to order, and when he reached new business, Meredith stood. "I'd like to propose a comprehensive community partnership initiative," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Based on untapped market analysis and social impact strategies that could significantly expand our revenue while addressing systemic barriers in our community." The room grew quiet. This wasn't the Meredith they knew, compliant, comfortable, safely aligned with traditional approaches. Marcus, invited to observe the partners' meeting, watched from the back with careful attention. "We're overlooking a $2.3 billion market segment right here in Charlotte," Meredith continued, clicking through slides she'd prepared over the weekend. "Minority-owned businesses, community development projects, educational partnerships, all representing growth, opportunities we've ignored." "Meredith," Vernon interrupted diplomatically, "while community outreach is admirable, our focus should remain on proven client sectors where we have established expertise." "With respect, Vernon, our established expertise just cost us competitive advantage," Meredith replied firmly. "We lost 3 major contracts last quarter to firms that understand diversity as business strategy, not charity." Jonathan Whitmore, still glowing from his recent promotion, laughed dismissively. "Come on, Meredith. These social programs sound nice, but they're not sustainable business models. We can't compromise our standards just to feel better about ourselves." The condescension in Jonathan's voice, the same tone she'd used countless times herself, ignited something fierce inside Meredith. "Jonathan, what standards are you referring to? The same ones that qualified you for senior VP despite lower performance metrics than 3 other candidates?" The room went dead silent. Meredith had just violated an unspoken rule about acknowledging how privilege actually functioned in their organization. But instead of backing down, she felt liberated by the honesty. "This isn't about lowering standards," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "It's about examining whether our standards actually measure what we think they measure. Marcus's research shows that expanding our definition of qualifications could increase both profit and performance." Miss Blackwell, Robert Morrison, a senior partner, spoke with paternal authority. "You're letting emotions cloud your business judgment. These initiatives sound compassionate, but they're ultimately about politics, not profit." "Actually, Mr. Morrison, they're about reality," Meredith replied, surprising herself with her confidence. "I spent Saturday tutoring 8-year-olds who are already performing above grade level despite attending underfunded schools. Their potential is extraordinary, but our current hiring practices will never recognize it because we're measuring the wrong things." The meeting erupted in uncomfortable murmurs, partners exchanging glances that ranged from concerned to hostile. Vernon called for order, but Meredith wasn't finished. "I'm proposing we pilot community partnerships with measurable outcomes," she concluded. 6 months, clear metrics, full accountability. If it doesn't generate revenue and identify talent, I'll personally fund the program's termination." "And if it does succeed?" Marcus asked from the back of the room, speaking for the first time. Meredith turned to meet his gaze, feeling something shift between them. professional respect deepening into something more personal. If it succeeds, we admit that our definition of merit was too narrow and we expand it permanently. The room stayed silent as Meredith gathered her materials and walked out, knowing she'd just ended her comfortable place in their exclusive circle, but feeling more authentic than she had in years. 3 months later, Meredith stood in the same community center where her transformation had begun, but now as director of community partnership development at her own consulting firm. The pilot program she'd proposed had exceeded every projection, generating $1.2 million in new contracts while identifying talent the traditional system had overlooked. 5 of her colleagues had followed her when she'd left Hartwell and Associates to start Bridges Consulting with 2 other partners who shared her vision of business as a tool for social progress. Today, they were celebrating their first major success, helping Sandra Williams launch her own cleaning service through microloans and business development support. "Mama, tell them about the college scholarship," Destiny urged, tugging at Sandra's arm with 8-year-old excitement. Sandra beamed with pride that illuminated the entire room. Destiny got accepted to the summer enrichment program at Charlotte Math and Science Academy, full scholarship for academically gifted students. Meredith felt tears of joy watching this brilliant child whose potential had been recognized and nurtured rather than overlooked. The scholarship program was one of Bridges Consulting's partnerships, connecting corporate clients with educational nonprofits in mutually beneficial relationships. "Miss Meredith helped with my application essay," Destiny announced proudly. "She said my ideas about making math fun for other kids were really smart." Marcus appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the community center's new cafe. Another partnership success story that employed formerly incarcerated individuals. "How does it feel to be an actual mentor instead of just a consultant?" he asked with a warm smile. "Terrifying and wonderful," Meredith replied honestly. "I spent years thinking I understood success, but I was only seeing half the picture." Their relationship had evolved slowly over the months, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to justice rather than convenience or chemistry. Marcus challenged her constantly, supporting her growth while refusing to let her slide back into comfortable assumptions. "My parents still don't speak to me," she admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "They think I've lost my mind, throwing away my real career for social work. What do you think?" Marcus asked, settling beside her on the community center's front steps. Meredith looked around at the bustling scene, children playing, adults taking GED classes, elderly residents receiving health screenings, teenagers learning job skills. This was the community she'd driven past for years without seeing, now vibrant with possibility because someone had invested in its potential. "I think I finally understand what you meant about expanding definitions of merit," she replied. "These people aren't less qualified. They just needed someone to recognize their qualifications differently." Marcus nodded, his expression serious but hopeful. "And you, Meredith Blackwell from Charleston, turned out to be exactly the person who could translate between worlds. Your privilege became a bridge instead of a barrier." As the afternoon sun set over Charlotte's skyline, Meredith reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She'd lost her trust fund, her social circle, her family's approval, but gained something more valuable: authenticity, purpose, and the knowledge that real success meant lifting others as you climbed. "So," Marcus said with a grin that made her heart skip, "ready for our date tonight? I promise the restaurant I picked actually pays their staff living wages." Meredith laughed, the sound carrying joy and freedom she'd never experienced in her previous life. "Why not both?" she replied, echoing the question that had started her transformation. "A successful business and a relationship built on justice. Turns out some combinations work better than I ever imagined." 6 months ago, she'd believed that fairness meant treating everyone the same. Now she understood that true fairness meant recognizing that people started from different places and needed different types of support to reach their potential. Her privilege hadn't disappeared, but it had found its purpose, creating opportunities for others to succeed. As they walked hand in hand toward Marcus's car, Meredith felt complete for the first time in her life. knowing that love built on mutual respect and shared values was stronger than any relationship built on similar backgrounds and comfortable assumptions. The Charlotte skyline stretched before them, full of possibility and promise, much like the future they were building together, one that honored both their individual journeys and their commitment to creating a more just world for children like Destiny, who deserved every opportunity to shine.